Chapter 3 of Poppy Playtime is the first one that was worked on with a different engine to achieve enhanced graphics. This is why many textures and animations had to be remastered for this new chapter. The significant change the game underwent was so extreme that they even considered remastering the first 2 chapters of Poppy Playtime. For the first time in the world of Poppy Playtime, a chapter will be dubbed in languages other than English. Now we'll have Latin, Spanish, and Portuguese. And how long will this chapter last? The exact duration is not known, but an approximate would be around 2 hours, more or less similar to the duration of Chapter 2 of Poppy Playtime. Chapter 3 will focus primarily on play care, the chilling place where all those horrifying experiments with orphan children took place. But the arrival at this place was planned by Poppy, as she diverted the train that was heading directly to the exit. This is so that we can help her stop Catnap. Inside Playcare, there were many other rooms, such as classrooms or playrooms where children could have fun and play. And these were also filled with many decorations from the factory. There were, of course, rooms where the children slept, dining areas, and other recreation areas. We will have a much improved mechanics with the grab pack, and just as we will have access to the purple hand, we will probably also be surprised by the appearance of the long-awaited yellow hand. Speaking of improvements and mechanics, for the first time we will be able to interact with the mysterious gas mask. We will use it to protect ourselves from the red gas that floods the factory, marking the first appearance of this mask. The directors announced that there were several hidden clues from Chapter 3 in Poppy Playtime, but probably no one even noticed. One of these could be a reference to the lockers where we could hide, as in the teasers for Chapter 3 we can see many lockers. So we'll have to wait to see if this will be a new mechanic in Chapter 3. Another interesting thing we saw in Chapter 3 was the Project Playtime phone, which first appeared in the game's Phase 2. So far, we don't know exactly why this phone appears in Chapter 3, whether it can be used or if it's just another reference. It is highly likely that the person calling us on this phone is Experiment 1006. He knows about all the atrocities committed against orphan children, and possibly things may turn around, and the experiment becomes one of our allies. Developers mentioned a curious mechanic, stating that in Chapter 3, players might be able to ride monsters, just like in Garden of Ban, but it's still not known if this will become a reality in the game. Originally, it was thought that the release of this chapter would be on the same anniversary date as Poppy Playtime, but the developers decided to delay its release to continue refining some details. One of the most popular theories before the release of the last teaser was that Catnap was probably going to be a rabbit instead of a cat. And this arose from the joke started by Motia Games, an animator who has trolled on several occasions. Although many suspected that Catnap would be the main antagonist of the chapter, several fans had the suspicion that the main antagonist would be Daisy, one of the discarded villains from Chapter 2 of Poppy Playtime. Even though Daisy's role was discarded, many fans hoped to see her back in Chapter 3. Their hope was so great that they even created animations where Daisy was the main villain. Although now we know that the appearance of Huggy Wuggy is confirmed in this Chapter 3, Mob Entertainment had already given us a small reference to his return. In one of their joke videos, they anticipated the return of this character. Furthermore, another clue pointing to Huggy Wuggy's return was an official plushie released by Mob, which was white with various seams on its body. We can even see that it has button eyes. This would suggest that Huggy Wuggy returned from the dead. In one of the videos Mob made before the trailer was released, we could see how Kissy Missy was transported to a warehouse to be enclosed. Inside this warehouse, we could observe the monstrous version of Kissy Missy. Each of these smiling critters has a particularly distinctive smell, all done simply so that the children would be in direct contact with strong odors. This way, Playtime Co. could use the strong red gas with no problem. The cartoon style of the smiling critters is inspired by the 1980s cartoons, like Care Bears and My Little Pony. Apart from having vivid colors, they also have a symbol on their chests that signifies something. The main goal of the smiling critters is for them to be part of the adoption program for the orphan children at the Playtime Co. factory. The program consisted of giving each orphan a plushie, and of course, providing them with a home within Playcare. We know that Dog Day's personality is the opposite of Catnap's, as he represents everything joyful and curious. Interestingly, his name is a play on words, with Dog Day suggesting a bad day, which is quite ironic given the character's personality, but when you consider his backstory, the name makes a lot of sense. In fact, we had a reference to the smiling critters in Project Playtime in Phase 2, when the map was released in the recycling mill. We can see a poster where 3 plushies are walking with the phrase, "Take a step as if it were the last." These plushies being Dog Day, Kicking Chicken, and the Unicorn. Like all toys in Poppy Playtime, the smiling critters also have life. Therefore, it's very likely that these monsters can enter other toys and devour them from the inside. In one of the Playtime Co cameras, we saw a smiling critter walking around a bunch of security cells, almost as if they were containment rooms for other monsters that escaped from the factory. Just as the smiling critters have a characteristic smell, each of them represents something. For example, Bobby represents love, Booba represents knowledge, Crafty Corn represents creativity, Kicking Chicken represents fun, and Picky Piggy represents feeding. The lavender scent put on Catnap was mainly to disguise the potent smell of the gas that made children sleep. Possibly the lavender scent from Catnap was planned from the beginning. In Project Playtime, we can see a poster where Daisy, the flower, is along with 2 other flowers, which happen to be a rose and a lavender flower. These are 2 of the characteristic scents used in the smiling critters. Many have thought that the red gas may be closely related to the Poppy serum, a chemical compound created specifically to experiment with all kinds of living creatures. It's interesting because the effects of Poppy can be very similar to those caused by Catnap's gas. Another interesting fact is that this serum can be also found in Poppy's hair, something that is possibly related to Catnap's red gas. Like the name of Dog Day, the name Catnap is a play on words, cat and nap. In addition, catnip is like catweed, if you know what I'm saying. Believe it or not, there is an official Catnap toy in its monstrous version. The interesting thing is that its label says this plush does not contain gas, referring to the fact that the toys in the video game did contain gas. So far, we know a lot about Catnap's personality, but what we didn't know is that his monstrous version will have the ability to change size, making it the first monster in Poppy Playtime that can change dimensions. And this is because this purple kitty is made with elastic plastic, a material created by Poppy Playtime Co. that allows objects to stretch a lot. In the ARG, a lot of sensitive information was found, as well as many Playtime Co recording cameras. The curious thing is that these recordings may not be from when the company was in operation, but rather current, as in these scenes we can see that the train from Chapter 2 is not in the train station. In this ARG, we could also observe an email between Elliot Ludwig and Leith Pierre, 2 important characters in the Poppy Playtime story. This email mentioned mainly the Huggy Wuggies that escaped, just as happened in the Huggy Wuggy tape where we saw him escape. The interesting thing about this email is that it was quickly deleted, because it didn't match the Poppy Playtime story. At the time the email was sent, Johnny Walker did not yet exist. The real reason Theodore Gramble was put in Catnap is because the child knew too much, thanks to the imaginary friend he had. This friend was the one who told him to sabotage certain things in the factory. Theodore's imaginary friend was actually Experiment 1006, who manipulated him, but at the same time had a friendship. It's the first time we see 2 monsters cooperating in the Poppy Playtime story. Interestingly, the Hour of Joy happened on August 8th, the same date as the anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. The first text of the Hour of Joy appeared for the first time on the VHS of Kissy Missy. The shapeless figure they show in the trailer contains several stacks of toys, but on the top of its head we can see a silhouette very similar to that of the piglet Picky Piggy, one of the members of the Smiling Critters. In case you were wondering, it's known that Catnap, despite being a cat, it's not part of the Kitty Cat Collection, a collection of cat toys created by Playtime Co., which includes Candy Cat and Cat B. Before Catnap, there were two other experiments quite similar, which possibly gave rise to this character. It's not known exactly what they were, but they were probably failed experiments before creating Catnap. In this chapter 3, beside Catnap's experiment, we will also have another experiment, of whom we know nothing about. This would be experiment 1160. One that was found in the ARG files, but we still have no idea who it could be. With all this information, several fans started to analyze, and they believed that it could be Boxy Boo. He has a surprising ability to move, but this theory may not be correct, since Boxy was one of the first experiments. To get you excited, it is known that the next year, Mob plans to release a book in which a lot of information that they have not revealed in chapter 3 will probably come. Probably some of the biggest mysteries we find in this chapter will have a solution in this official Poppy Playtime book. This chapter 3 will be one of the darkest chapters of Poppy Playtime, as the developers have said that it is aimed at a much older audience that we are used to. Being aimed at an older audience, it is highly likely that we will find some quite grotesque scenes in chapter 3, as confirmed by one of the developers.